So welcome all. We're here today to talk about what the programme calls the 3 pillars of modern marketing, which doesn't actually have anything to do with digital, or only tangentially actually, but it's really about ethics, trust and sustainability. Certainly in my slightly long career now, at one stage in the 90s I was doing an MBA at London Business School, and we had a lecturer who came and told us that anything that the company did that wasn't directly delivering value to shareholders, increasing their profit, was theft and should be avoided. So when I asked her, so what about charitable giving, what about social responsibility, she said, theft. 10 years later, we had our reunion, and Enron had happened in the meantime, and the attitude and what they were teaching was actually rather different from there on. Fast forward to now, and I think you've got a really, really different landscape in terms of the way this is seen. And really, I think what this is about, is, in terms of trust, is it's the unwritten contract between your company, your brand, and your consumers. You know, when they're going to buy, as you know, was at Diageo a bottle of vodka, or when they're going to watch a program on the BBC, there are certain expectations around, but they have expectations around the company and around what you're doing that are slightly broader, and that's what we'll be focusing on today. If you look at today, you know, some brands are using purpose, and some very successfully. Some, in the case of the Pepsi ad, which we all infamously know, probably less successfully, to try and position and differentiate their brands for profit. At the same time, you have people like Mark Ritson saying that's just marketers being wimpy, and can't they get back to doing what they should be doing, which is selling? So should brands be involved in this at all? Unilever, particularly led by Keith Weed, have made the case really for sustainable business over the last 10 years, really quite persuasively. But at the same time, you have a lot of companies, and you look at Facebook and Cambridge Analytica, or Starbucks and others, and the issues around payment of tax, where there's certainly a view of the corporation as not being about sustainability and not contributing to society. So what's the modern marketeer to make of this, is the question we're going to focus on today. Is it a question of making yourself look good and some nice tidy housekeeping, or is it actually fundamental to the way you need to consider your brand in modern business? And to help me today, we've got 4 great people. So I'm going to start with Imran. Can you all introduce yourselves and say what you do and a brief bit about the company you're from, and then we'll get into the session. So.
Morning, everyone. My name is Imran Zaman. I'm the Group CMO for Amway for the region of Europe, Russia, India, and Africa, based out of the UK. Amway is a multi-level marketing company, so we sell nutrition, beauty, and household cleaning products through independent distributors to direct customers.
Okay.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Alison Keith. I am the Global Head of Media at Coty. Coty is a business that most people won't have heard of. We're a pure-play beauty company. We own brands such as Gucci, Rimmel, Bourjois, as well as a large professional haircare division.
Morning all. I'm Judy Groves. I'm the CMO of Rigby Group, the unusual one up here, I think, because we're a 5th largest privately owned UK company, operating in about 23 different countries, and we're quite eclectic. So 2/3 of that is technology. Then we've got airports, hotels, real estate, air ambulance, jet centres. We are the helicopter services for the Navy and UK military in the Falklands. So very eclectic when you get to the end of it.
And Steve.
Hi guys, I'm the CMO for TGI Fridays in the UK. So we have 87 restaurants in the UK. Been there for 18 months, and actually my prior role was at Starbucks, so I'm not going to talk about that one. Yeah.
And we may or may not be joined during the session by Chris Lawn, who, now Chris is the Global Head of Digital at Philip Morris, which is an interesting one from his point of view. And for those who don't know, Philip Morris, if you go on their website, they now talk about a smoke-free future, and their mission is to move people from traditional cigarettes into other forms of vaping and things like that. So a real shift there. But I'd really like to start with Steve, because I think, Steve, last year rather, at TGI Fridays, you had, shall we say, an interesting experience of some people protesting outside your restaurants. And can you tell us a bit about that?
It's not like trouble follows me around. I just yeah, look, the casual dining market as a market last year had a fairly tough market, and I think we ended up, unfortunately, being the poster child for a few of the ills of the casual dining market as well. So. We had Unite putting us firmly in their sights and targeting us for unfair tipping practices or for not paying minimum wage, both of which were fundamentally untruths and actually cut to the core of a little bit. They really hurt us as a brand and the people within the brand. To give you the background, we don't put service onto any of the bills that our guests receive in restaurant. We believe that if you get good service, you'll pay, you'll tip. And we worked with the teams internally to understand how that was distributed. So previously, 100% of that went to the front of house team, so the waiters, and we decided to split that with the back of house team as well, so some of the kitchen teams. So, but that was done in a consultation with the team. We felt very comfortable about it, and so did the team. What Unite got hold of was the fact that suddenly some of the waiters were getting less money within our restaurants, and that became the issue. But it wasn't really an issue. Or so we believed, and I think that's the real point here. So we believed, because what did happen is we had people protesting outside of our restaurants. We had lots of swirl suddenly created within our business, trying to manage this issue that actually we never saw as an issue, because it's totally counter to what we as a business and as a brand do.
Yeah, and that's very similar to when I was at the BBC, and the whole Jimmy Savile thing, right? The internal thing to say, well, actually, you've got to appreciate that even if the BBC did nothing wrong, which you firmly believe, and obviously the BBC doesn't want to harbour a paedophile, that's the perception out there, and that's the perception you've got to manage.
And it's twofold then. So what happens is you have an energy and time spent within the business trying to deal with this, and not running the business per se. So you suddenly all of the effort and energy is directed in this direction. Secondly, what it does create is a groundswell of opinion out there that starts to make people think differently about the brand. And that's the bit that really hurt, because that's the bit that we knew was so fundamentally untrue about what we were about as a brand. But actually we couldn't control it, because once it was out there and once this thing started to gather momentum, it had a life of its own.
So that's largely through social media, or?
Through social media, but actually what you start to see is it's not just through social media, but it's through the network of individuals within the team. Suddenly it made some of the team members start to doubt, were we as a business treating them as we'd always said we would, as family? And we were, but because of the level of churn you get in our industry, you have new people join the business and suddenly they start to doubt. And that, again, this started to cut to the real core of what we were about as a business.
So it's affecting the staff. Did it actually affect the numbers on the business as well?
Yeah, so it affects the numbers on the business. One, because you've got people managing all of this. So energy and sort of work is impacted. Secondly, we started to track, as many of you will do, we have brand tracking metrics. We have two metrics, positive buzz and negative buzz, that we're tracking. We saw a positive buzz start to fall, and negative start to track upwards. Why is that important? Because actually we've done some modelling since that looks at a 1% shift in that positive buzz can wipe off £4 million of our sales. So that 1% shift we couldn't control. Suddenly it was out of our control. It was being managed by others. And you talk about earlier on, you mentioned sales. Sales, doing the other stuff is not the right thing. For me, this fundamentally proves that actually doing the right stuff, but being in control of your message is really important. And that the highlight for me here is we didn't have the good stuff that we do ready to go out and talk about. We knew we did all of this good stuff. We knew this was fundamentally untrue, but we didn't have any way of landing that message or talking to people about that. And that caught us out.
So what are you doing to get yourself out of it?
So what we're doing to get ourselves out of it. So first thing, actually, as a business, from top to bottom, from board level to restaurant level, the only thing we're now tracking is positive buzz. One metric across the entire business. So sales is not the number one metric that we're tracking. Positive buzz is. The second thing we're doing is letting the team be the face of the brand. And letting them tell their stories, because actually people don't need to hear it from me. And what we don't want to do, people equally don't need to hear it from a glossy marketing activity that is about the next new burger that we're launching. That's not important anymore. And it is a longer term play. And I think we have to be able to do the longer term play. So I was filming yesterday some of the stories from our team members that will be front and centre about talking to people about what this brand does and why we do things in the right way, so that we're not caught on the hop a little bit. Because I think the thing that is really highlighted for me is if someone finds even one little chink and it suddenly becomes a cause, you can't control that. And it will take on its own life very, very quickly.
Yeah.
And you need to be really, really, really confident in the stories you have to tell and be able to go out and tell them, to be able to say, actually, this is not true.
Yeah, it's interesting. As you're talking, it reminds me that it's worth looking at the McDonald's case history in the UK, because about 10, 15 years ago, they were the lightning rod for all sort of consumer issues. And they, as well as driving their short-term stuff, you'll see in the monopoly stuff, which has again been controversial, they've had a programme of what they call trust marketing, which is all about the ingredients in their burgers, not stuff that drives sale, but just reinforces the good that they do and the charitable stuff they do around Ronald McDonald and all that. And over 10 years, that has really started to bear fruit for them. So, Imran, to come to you now. So, Amway, you also found yourself in a bit of bother, but about 10 years ago, didn't you?
Yeah, correct. So part of our business, obviously, was the UK market. And in 2008, the government, through Department of Trade of Industry, took us to court on the basis of that the distributors that were obviously selling our products to customers, they were basically having unethical behaviour. And there were complaints coming from, obviously, consumers. So from a consumer protection perspective. So what we went through is a whole legal, obviously, process. And we were successful in the end. But that process basically allowed us to sort of reset ourselves as a global company where we're a family-owned company. Obviously, we celebrate 60 years this year, but at that time, what it was happening was the distributors that were contracted to Amway, they would call themselves independent. So, but however, they were the face and the voice of the brand out there to customers. And through that process, and part of the conditions was Amway had to take total accountability and responsibility, which we as a family company said, that's great, that's what we've got to do. And one of the things we changed was that we said, you're no longer an independent distributor, you're actually an Amway distributor, and we will control everything that goes from a brand through the distributor and also around the distributor. So it was important for us to take that in control. At that time when we won the court ruling, based on the conditions, we had approximately around 20,000 distributors in the UK. And we had to go through a consultation process to say this is what the new business model will be. And around 15,000 of them decided not to renew their contract, sign with us. So we went from like approximately a $60 million business to under 20 million. But what the owners decided to do is that was the right thing to do, because what we wanted to do was have a healthy, sustainable, long-term business. And in the short term, yes, we saw the gains through this misbehavior going on with distributors, but we said as an organization, the owner said, that's not who we are. And we sort of had to re-look at ourselves in the mirror about what was our purpose. And the second generation was running the company at the time, and the founders at the time were still alive. So they had to consult themselves and say, what did we stand for at the beginning in 1959? So that's really been a change. And that sort of had repercussions right around the globe, not just for Amway, but also the industry, because a lot of people were looking at the ruling that would happen in the UK. If it was negative or even with the conditions, it could have an effect to other markets and other companies. So since then, we started to shape up the actual industry regulations in many markets. And a lot of it is always based around the ethical practice of Amway and then doing the right thing for distributors, but also customers. And building on what Steve says, one of the things at the time we were doing brand tracking, but we never measured the attribute of trust. Now it's one of our 5 attributes that we measure right across all our markets, because I think we're fortunate that in 2007 and 8, there wasn't the power of social that is now, and we probably could have had much greater repercussions, just not in UK, but even outside.
Yeah, and I think that trust thing is fundamental, and certainly, my last role, during the Savile crisis, we saw trust go down quite considerably, as you would expect. And it was quite a shock to a lot of the creative people who thought, well, trust is all about whether people think we're telling the truth about the news. And actually, the trust was about how you're managing the business. And particularly, trust went down most when the award was made to George Entwistle, the departing Director General, of a £450,000 severance package, which in private company terms isn't massive, rather than the scandal, because they trusted the BBC wasn't seeking to do a Savile, but actually that you'd given money to somebody who they didn't regard as competent was the really thing where you really betrayed their trust. So great. But you talked about the founders and it's certainly slightly different, I guess, in a private company. But they very much had sustainability as part of their agenda from early on, didn't they, in terms of the way they made the products? You talk about that?
Yeah, so the company was founded in 1959 in the US, and we started with household cleaning products and nutrition products, supplements. And in both aspects, at that time, it was all around sustainability, around environmental. We had household cleaning that had what we called at the time biodegradability, focused around, even in 1950, around packaging and in terms of recycling. And the interesting thing is that's always been there, so as part of our core categories. And after this court case, and specifically what happened around in 2013-14, we put a strategic objective to really go after the U35. And when we did research with that group, we saw a lot of the millennials talk about in terms of the importance of a brand or a company being trusted towards helping the environment, sustainability, and also willing to pay a premium. So we looked at basically what we're doing already as a purpose, and we said, we've got all this, let's say, values and content, and we focus around product, people, and processes. And we said, and I'll give you an example, we've got a lot of organic farms around the globe that are all certified. We just basically put like a webcam on the farms, put it onto our website to allow people to have a look and say what we call seed to supplement. So we could see actually the whole supply chain process, and we control that ourselves and obviously with vendors through that process. So it's actually become a very value-add story for us. And we leverage that, especially in many emerging markets like Russia, India, China, where consumers are really driving for that kind of, let's say, intent question. And we've got that story, we've got that content, but we've just got to find the smart way to push that through the different communication channels.
Yeah. So here we're starting to move on, I think, because we've been talking mainly about how getting the basics right so you can actually trade and do the right thing by your customers. But here now you're talking about a place where actually the ethical practice starts to be part of the way that you promote and actually sell your products.
Correct. Yeah. So like everyone, because we went to the second generation as owners, and then we've started to bring the third generation. We had to look at, okay, what's over our purpose, what we stand for. And we really focused back to what the founders talked about is helping people live better lives. But it was around the health of people and the health of the world. And that's how it started. Yeah. So we now integrate that as our broad purpose platform. And we do a lot of active, let's say, engagement to the distributors, but also out there to key influencers, to consumers, to ensure people understand what we stood for. Because I think the company's really focus is, we've been around for 60 years. We want to be around for another 60 years, 100 years, and we don't want to lose what the intent was from the beginning. And
certainly Keith Wood at Unilever would say, it's the right thing for the top line because that's where consumers are going, but also there is a benefit in terms of sustainability because of its impact on cost and therefore the bottom line. Have you found that as well?
Yeah, I think what we saw was that the products obviously are becoming very competitive in terms of price point in the market that we're in, both in nutrition and beauty and household. And what we saw was that we were always trying to compete on the basic features and benefits of a product. And then we said, well, we need to add and talk about the value of our brand, of our product, of our, obviously what we call our traceability process. And that actually added value by maintaining the price. So we're giving back in terms of value to the consumer, but it was sort of an investment. We saw that as, it's not taken away from the bottom line. It's allowing us to invest in the brand, but more in terms of long-term healthy growth.
Very good, thank you very much. So, Coty now. Because I guess in beauty, that really is an area where, the ethics of what you're selling and why you're selling it is important, not just to your reputation, but directly how consumers feel about you and the product. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, as a company, we performed a large merger about nearly 3 years ago. And at that point, we reinvented the fundamentals of the company to, it's a strapline, but it runs through the entire business of celebrating and liberating the diversity of your beauty. So very much being about, we're not going to tell you how to be beautiful. You are beautiful in exactly the way that you want to be, and use our products in any way that you wish in order to achieve what's really true to you. And I think as an industry, because it physically can literally change the way people look, it's very important that we portray that in a way that fits with modern society. Beauty has had, let's say, a bad heritage of telling people what beautiful looks like, and what we really wanted to push towards was actually celebrating that in all its forms. So, for example, we have brands like CoverGirl, very sort of, obvious clue in, let's say, usage. But then we had a cover boy that we launched a couple of years ago, because actually it's not for us to say how people should and shouldn't use our products. But there is a lot of ethics, everything from the supply chain, whether that's palm oil or animal testing, or just the portrayal through to body image for young girls nowadays, and with social media, that we really need to take some of that responsibility and help consumers use our brands and enjoy our brands, but also continue to feel good about themselves.
And is that push coming from consumers or from you internally, or both?
I think it comes from both, because I mean, fundamentally, we're all consumers at the same time as being marketers. You know, I still wear makeup, so it comes from the recognition that society is changing. People's expectations of brands have fundamentally changed. It's not just something you buy anymore. There's so much choice that you can kind of find ones that resonate with you. So it's being a point of difference, but it's also something that we believe in as a company, and there's lots of areas that we work on within the company in order to really show how we stand up for that. So there's a campaign that we launched at the end of last year with Rimmel, called I Will Not Be Deleted. So obviously in the realm of social media, people put up pictures all the time, and you can see in the comments the sort of the trolls come in and tell you, oh, you don't look good enough to put that on social media, etc. We did some research working with a charity called Cybersmile, that millions and millions and millions of images are deleted every year by people who've put them out there, and then they get so much hate that they take them back down again, and you just go, God, that's horrible. So how can we work with the charity to really improve the area of cyberbullying or just sort of the internet, to make it a place that celebrates everyone for all of their diversity in all of their forms, versus it being a conformist sense of beauty.
Yeah, that really chimes with what, I don't know if you're Tim Berners-Lee, I think it's 30 years since the launch of the web last week. He was talking about the web now being at a point where it can fulfill its expectations if there's a reset, or it's going to be on a downward spiral. And there's something he's launched which is called the contract for the web. If you go on, it's the 3 expectations of what tech companies will do, what governments will do, what consumers will do, and what ordinary companies will do. And what companies will do is, one, tech companies have to make the internet freely available to everybody. The rest of us, the other 2 are relevant. One is that being clear that people are in control of their data and in control of their privacy, rather than you being in control of it. And the other one is ensuring that the internet is a space which can promote the best of humanity, not the worst. And it's probably very much in that space that you're in with that Rimmel campaign, where actively as a company you're doing that. Yeah.
Absolutely.
And so that must be quite a change, because a lot of the brands that you have are legacy brands. 'Cause I think you're born out of some of the previous P&G brands. Mm-hmm. How's that been culturally to try and change?
I mean, a lot of these brands are sort of very iconic and have been around for a huge number of years, some of them over sort of 100 years. I mean, Max Factor literally invented the word makeup, so, it doesn't get much more the start of the industry than that. But we have brands, like CoverGirl, which is very much a sort of US brand, and they've been using the same strapline. Great one, easy breezy CoverGirl, for sort of 15, 16 years. But there was a feeling that, could we make the brand more relevant and more authentic to where women are now, versus it's about being blonde and wearing your makeup a certain way. So we worked with a lot of research and a lot of consumers to come up with something that just felt a lot more authentic to where women are with, or not just women, but where people are with beauty now as a space, about really getting it to sit within where the consumer feels comfortable, instead of us dictating to them that this is how you should think of our brand, being a lot more inclusive, using a huge more sort of diversity in terms of both models and consumers that we work with.
Brilliant, thank you. And now I think for something completely different, Judy. As Judy said, she works for a very large private company, which I hadn't heard called, from Rigby. It does everything from airports to hotels to technology to property to all sorts of things. Very much founded by the founder and his family. But interestingly, you've been playing in this ethical and sort of charitable space actually since the dawn of the company, just because it's what the founder wanted to do. Yeah. So can you tell us a bit about what the company does in that space?
So we were founded 45 years ago by a philanthropic entrepreneur. So from day one, he believed that you put back into the communities you serve from the way you do business, and that you do business honestly. And as the first business that was built, which is now 2 billion, is technology, he was alone in his view in that industry, I'll tell you. So, and all the other businesses are built on the same principles. So we've always won business by doing what we do, and we've always tried not to make too high a margin, and we've always given something in the order of 15-20% of our profits into our foundation, which then puts back. And
So where does that foundation put back to? Is it?
So the foundation
Anyone
puts
and
back
everywhere?
partly. We let the employees come forth with what they want to do, and they're much more engaged today than they were at the start. And they do their own fundraising as well, and we try and match funds for them. But we look for legacy projects that basically, and by the way, I'm going to say 2 words that we've only just come up with to try and encapsulate exactly what it is we do, unleashing potential. So in everything we do, that's what we're looking to do. So the big projects tend to be things like we did Millennium Point, which is in the Midlands, and put £1 million into that, which was it's one of 2 Millennium projects that's still there, by the way.
Yeah.
But it was meant to be lifelong learning. That was the spirit of the whole thing, whatever age, whatever, etc. It was using technology to help make that experience better. We have put a phenomenal amount of money, about 2 million plus, into better cancer care. And we've paid for a cancer centre, we've trained nurses to be able to go out in the community and give chemo. And we've also, it was the first at the time, I'm a Marie Curie patron myself, but we've put Marie Curie and Macmillan together in a central call centre, so they work together when they go out. So it's about better life, better living, and releasing potential, basically. It sounds so cheesy when you say it, but it's what we kind of do.
So you said that's something of a post-rationalisation. Is this really about what the founder and the family feel they want to do? Is that really where it comes from the start? Or has there ever been more of a strategy around it than that?
So there wasn't a strategy around it at all, and it was just something that we did, our employees did. We hadn't really articulated it at all. And we've got it in our technology business. We've got a lot of major public sector customers, and what started to happen was we were almost looking in this whole brave new world of everybody wanting to put ethical, sustainable value into their brands. Because we hadn't gone forth and announced it and built it in, we were almost looking as if we didn't.
Yeah.
So it's a really weird situation to be in. So we've almost had to go through an autopsy and dissect ourselves and look at how we do it, what exactly it is we do, so we can actually articulate it back and share it. And I think that has helped with a lot more employees. I mean, we've now got 11,000 employees. So, we started off with 10. So it's easy to manage. But I do think the culture is there. Our challenge has been, how do we articulate it and share it?
So it certainly had an impact in terms of employee engagement. What about, do you think it could have an impact if you really made it part of the story of the company and with customers in terms of business terms, or not?
I think it has. And I think the best way to describe it, because we're such an eclectic mix of all these different sectors, but I've just particularly gone through a relatively new part of our business, which is the air ambulance business. Yeah. And if I just highlight that, it will show how it's made a difference, but it's a lot easier to illustrate on one specific thing. So we've got a business that you'll all have travel insurance. So, if should something dreadful happen to you or someone you love and care about, then effectively you make a phone call and hopefully somebody is going to come and get you home and make sure that you're looked after properly and you recover. Yeah? So in our air ambulance business, we've always had the mission that we get somebody home in the shortest possible way, in the way that gives them the best possible chance of recovery, right? So what we found was that it's all on price. So what happens is when you ring your travel insurer, they've got an intermediary body that will go and get 3 quotes. right? And what happens is they go for the cheapest quote. So our medical director, who runs all the services in the northwest of England, we started hearing the most horrendous stories, and nobody knows this because how often are you going to ring your travel insurer because you've had a major accident and you want to come home? So it's kind of once in a lifetime. And what happens is, depends on where you are, there'll be a transfer of aircraft, and people were being left for hours on a stretcher waiting for the next aircraft to come with no doctor or nurse or anything. They come into the UK, they wait for an ambulance, which isn't an NHS ambulance, by the way, it's a private ambulance, which may be ours. And then, horrendously, they dump them in A&E at a hospital. Right? And they just, someone, hopefully after hours, will come up and talk to somebody who's semi-conscious to say, what's the problem? And actually, even we couldn't believe how horrendous it was. And so we've come up with this thing. Somebody said cradle to grave, and I said absolutely not. We called it bed to bed. So basically, it's horrendous, isn't it? Sorry. And it was me that said cradle to grave to start with. So we basically send a doctor, 2 nurses, and a fully kitted out jet A&E. We go and get the person. We bring them back. If we wing to wing, we wing to wing with one of our own. Yeah, we've got our own ambulances. And then we've already got the NHS bed booked. So they go in and they do a proper handover with the doctors and nurses. Sorry, this is such a long story, but this is what we're like with everything we do. We suddenly realise the way we're doing it is phenomenally different from everybody else. Yeah. And no, we're not making as much profit as everybody else, are we? Yeah. Because we're doing all these extra things. But it doesn't stop us doing it that way.
Very good. Okay, so some really different experiences here. We've got about 10 minutes. So we've got some questions in from this area. I think what's coming over to me is that this is no longer an area which you can put down as theft. Not only that, it seems quite fundamental to the way that you manage your relations and, in fact, to the profitability of your businesses from a lot of things that we've heard. But any questions from the floor? Yes, over here.
Hi, Matthew from AEG. Steve, I just wondered, how do you measure positive buzz? You talked about it as being a key metric. What things are you doing to measure?
Yeah, so it's a metric we've custom built with some suppliers. So it's based off some customer satisfaction surveys, which we've done always. But then we started to build a tool that allows us to sweep up all of our social reviews. And build that up into a metric. So those 2 elements then give us one total positive buzz score. So I think previously what we had done is just based it on the customer satisfaction survey. It's kind of a misnomer because in most cases that's your loyal guests completing that. So we wanted to weight it better to give us a fully a truthful metric.
Yeah. Good. And the buzz is just the score is just the positives versus the negatives, and whether you've
it's based on the number of 5-star reviews you get on the social reviews. It's based on the number of 5-star reviews you get, and it gives you just 1%. So it sounds fundamentally very, very simple, and it is. But what it does allow us to do is go right down to every restaurant and know what their score is, right down to a region, and right down to the total business. So and when I say we're not tracking sales. The reason we're not tracking sales is the output of doing well on that, not necessarily the input.
Any more questions? Just over here.
Hi, I'm Alison. I work in financial services, right? Pretty straightforward. If you're misleading, you get fined. We've talked a lot about perception in products, and I think beauty is really interesting because the word natural is bandied around so much, but when you look into it, there's many brands posing to be natural that actually aren't scientifically, parabens and things. So how, as an industry, are you overcoming that? A bit like financial services is so clear-cut.
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't think, certainly for many of our brands, we could ever claim to be sort of organic and that sort of thing, because fundamentally it's very difficult to put pigmented makeup into something and have it be organic or something. But as an industry, I know there's been a lot of it bandied around that, that skin creams are natural or it's all X, Y, and Z. And you see I was looking at something I own at home that's not from our company the other day, and it said 98% derived from natural ingredients. You kind of go, I kind of hope so. Do you know what I mean? But the fact that you're calling it out probably means that it wasn't, which is slightly scary. So I think as an industry, there's lots of ways you can go, and it's very interesting when you start talking about the industry from a natural resources perspective. If you're talking about sustainability, if we all want to use, if we wanted to continue to make perfume from ambergris, which costs an absolute fortune and is actually whale vomit, we'll get into later. But it costs an absolute fortune and it smells amazing, weirdly. But if we continue to do that, and if, heaven forbid, whales became extinct, so you kind of go, do I hunt that? And we don't hunt whales for this stuff. You find it on beaches, by the way. But it's, and if you ever do, you'll be a millionaire. But you kind of go, well, do I use that natural product or do I biomimicry it, recreate it in a lab so I get the same effect and the same scent or whatever, but I'm having technically less impact in the natural world in one way, in the sense that I'm not using natural resources, but then I'm having to create a representation of that, which therefore means you're using resources in a different way. So there's lots of different ways that the industry is trying to approach it. And consumers will say, we want everything to be natural, but then if you say, well, in that case, we need to grow 4 billion more crocuses so you can have saffron-flavoured stuff. And that's going to take up X amount of water and X amount of power. And you kind of go, oh, we don't really want to do that. Or we can make it in a lab, and it's not technically natural, but it's inspired by and done in a way to try and minimise the impact on the natural world. So there isn't an answer per se, but there's lots of different approaches that companies are looking at about how do you attempt to meet that consumer desire and do it in a way that doesn't lie about it.
Yeah, and when in Diageo, there was the drinks legislation actually were different in different parts of the world. So in America, if something was, as you said, nature identical but created in the lab, you were allowed to claim it as natural. In Europe, you weren't. So things that were natural over in the States weren't over here. So there's a blurred line there, definitely. Any other questions? Over here.
So I work for a brand which has been promoting body positivity for 20 years really since it was founded, but 12 since the brand itself. And I think for all of you, you've had those questions at times about your own business and how you pull that to the fore. Now obviously body positivity is almost in fashion. How do I bring that to the fore without kind of looking like I'm a copycat? And I think you've all had kind of examples where that's in your business, but maybe wasn't at the forefront.
Anybody want to take that one? For a fee.
The only thing I'd say is we didn't realise how different we were until we actually started looking at what we do and talking to, and it's so basic, but literally when I started talking to customers about their experience and just said, tell me what happened, so, and then looking at how that compared with others, that's what gave us what was special. So whether it's, in your case, it's body positivity, it's, how do you differentiate getting somebody home from a crisis? How do you differentiate doing somebody's IT? And how do you differentiate which hotel you stay in when they're all the same price? How do you differentiate? So what I found with all of us, why do posh people go to one jet centre or another when there's 3 on the same site? And it was the same thing every time in that journey, different colouring in, but it was the same customer experience. And somewhere in what you do, there will be something that's special and unique to you.
Yeah, great. Okay, I'm going to stop the questions there. I'm going to do a quick summary, and then I'm going to come back to each of you to say what's the one takeout or bit of advice you'd give around this at the end. Okay, in just a couple of seconds. So you may have seen that the Advertising Association launched a thing in January which is about returning trust to advertising, because what had happened is, for the first time in the research that's done every year into the trustworthiness of certain professions, they put advertisers, stroke marketers, in, and they came bottom, all right? And so the Advertising Association is now on this mission to explain, and Keith Weed, their president, has this phrase that is, a brand without trust is just a product, and advertising without trust is just noise. And I think everything we've heard today would actually support that. Consumers increasingly demand that you behave ethically, and in some sectors where it's, in beauty, where it's relevant, actually making that part of your product marketing is important. In other areas, it may not be, but it may be an important table stakes for people, just for you really be able to even considered. And the next few years, I think certainly is going to be crucial. It's a shame Chris couldn't join us, but in terms of trust in what we do in media and what we do in the social area, and I think the focus on that is going to be enormous. So I think what we've learned is this area needs handling strategically, and if you're going to do stuff, find a way of communicating it, because if you don't, people will invent a story that is not the right story, and you really need to be thinking about how you get that message out to your audiences. So one thing from each of you. We'll start with Imran and work down to you.
Yeah, I would say just as marketer stewards of the brand, I think it's most important is we've got to look to ourselves to say we need to choose to do the right thing, but more importantly, do it the right way.
Yeah. Okay.
I think one of my sort of key things is to remember that we are all still consumers as well as marketers, and everything from how do you tell the right story, but also understanding what really is the story is really something that as you build a brand, you need to remember that it is just people, and so are we.
So I've kind of given half of mine away already. it's be real, be real. But we've just done a campaign in our airports, which is all about, we were the happiest airport in the world last year, and nobody actually made anything about it. and actually we're doing a Be Happy campaign. So my motto is understand, know what you do, and be real about it, and be happy about it.
Yeah.
I've got two, if that's all right. The first one was, don't assume that everybody out there knows the good that your businesses do. I think linked to that, people trust people. So the more that people become the face of the brand, the better. And the second one actually is, whilst there might be a long-term benefit to see in focusing on trust and building the trust of your brand, and you won't necessarily see that short-term spike, what you will see if you don't do it is the short-term downfall, because the speed of the down is much quicker than the speed.
The slow rate back up.
Quickly, aren't you?
Yeah. Thanks very much, Steve. That was a great session, and thank you all for your contributions. Hope you all have a great day. I'll be back, I think, towards the end, summarising some of the sessions with Judy, and so have a good time.
Thank you so much.